Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. I guess we can start just like about yourself and your background as a designer a little bit before we get into rock.
Sure. How far do we go back?
As I guess
It's a loaded question.
maybe starting with kind of like how you the path that ended up with I guess you joining Spotify. Even though I'm sure that goes back to the beginning, but maybe like those beginning little things that
Yeah, absolutely.
got you in the business.
I mean, sort of growing up, I skateboarded and played music in punk rock bands.
Love that.
So that influenced me a lot in terms of just creativity. I think like looking on the back of the skate decks and all the graphics, you know, from the 80s, 90s, and then just kind of music and music culture and seeing like, you know, record covers and how creative they were.
Yeah.
I think that really kind of spawned this idea of like design could actually be something I loved. I was never really great at drawing, even though I tried a lot. I had friends who were much better than me, you know, and you keep trying.
Right.
Doing a little graffiti growing up and that kind of stuff. But then when I found computers, that was just like a game changer for me. Like the idea of being able to like kind of mix things and change things and edit things and explore things was just like, I ended up spending all nights, you know, like, you know, even though it was a school night, I was up to like 3 a.m. like exploring new programs and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I fell into it. Very much self-taught in that sense. I later on went to Hyper Island, which is a school that's sort of focused on a new media, where you get paired up with technologists and sort of almost like producers. You build little teams and you answer to briefs. So I did that for 2 years, and then I came over to New York and I started as an animator.
Oh, awesome. Amazing.
Then animation led into web design, art direction, branding. I was working at RGA for many years, focusing on the Nike account, also doing sort of Samsung and YouTube and other clients and pitches and whatnot. Started a shoe brand for a little bit and tapped into fashion.
Nice.
Kind of realized that's not at all what I want to do.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was super fun. I think you learn from everything,
Definitely,
right? Like, and you gain experiences, and everything you do kind of helps steer you what you want to do next.
Right.
And then, I had an opportunity to come in and talk to Spotify, you know, and I was brought in to essentially build a design team.
Yeah.
There was one full-time, one freelancer at the time, and, you know, project by project, kind of unlocking a head count and adding to the team, making it bigger. But
what year did you start?
2016.
2016.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Amazing.
And so now I oversee a super talented design team of around like 20 designer, art directors, design directors, and we work on everything sort of brand marketing and partnership globally.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. I guess how do you think a lot of your kind of background and all that your influences kind of as you were developing as a designer, do you think that is kind of incorporated into your work at Spotify, or did you kind of like, now that you're at this, you know, huge company that has like set branding and everything, like you kind of almost learn their kind of branding, or do you think you can, you incorporate some of those older things like fashion, skateboarding, at least even partially into like the design world? I think everything we do here is really a team effort. So I wouldn't say that my individual influences the brand in that sense, but I think like we'll all have subjective ideas of what's good and what's bad design. And I think like it's natural that your instincts are going to be shaped a little bit by your experiences. Right. So I think for me personally, I definitely tend to vibrate more with the kind of work that is expressive, that is a little risky sometimes, and that sort of maybe even break molds sometimes. So growing up in punk rock, like that was all about exactly
like
the
sort
whole
of
energy,
having exactly that energy. But I want to say again that I think like the work we do is really influenced by everyone on the team, and also like not only the design team, having conversations with, you know, the larger creative teams, with the product design team and leadership overall, together sort of shaping the vision and what's right for Spotify and what's right for the project itself.
Got it. Yeah, so I feel like, it kind of feels like a democratic process that where everyone can kind of have their input and everything. I feel like me and like a lot of my audience and everything are like freelance, so we kind of don't have that like team setting a lot of the time, so it's kind of interesting to hear exactly like how it goes in to the process. It's definitely a different design process because it is more heads involved.
Absolutely, it has pros and cons, but I think like if you do it, if you work with really talented people, having more voices, more ideas, like actually benefits almost every project.
Absolutely.
And sometimes people are able to see things you're not able to see in the moment because you're so focused on the details.
Yeah.
And so like zooming in and out and having these like sometimes larger conversations and sometimes more specific maybe design conversations with a designer is really valuable, I think. And I'm learning constantly about business and all that kind of stuff, talking to people who's not designers. And that influence, you know, the design in the end of the day, and it makes it better.
Definitely. Yeah. So talk to me about how that process is with specifically like Wrapped every year. How early does that start? How kind of is that initial kind of idea of what it'll look like each year? How does that develop in that democratic kind of process where everyone's kind of got ideas?
So we kind of start with strategy actually, because we don't want to just make a design for the sake of it, right?
Yeah.
So we start with our strategy team, who's amazing, works up kind of like almost like a creative brief with insights and information that are very valuable. And then we build, that's kind of like the foundation we build everything upon. So we're trying to like look for interesting angles, and then we start exploring. And we explore really wide, a lot of different art directions, you know. The first kind of rounds of exploration is extremely like free. Like don't think too much, but it needs to connect with some of the stuff that we've learned. And then we go rounds and start essentially like naturally eliminating directions that for whatever reason might look amazing, but just doesn't connect as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
At this point in time, we sometimes kind of pair people up. Gotcha. So someone could have a really good initial idea, but someone could have a really good skill set to take that direction further.
Right.
And then in the end, we usually end up with 3 or so really, really good directions that's really hard to pick between.
Yeah.
And that's when we also start having like more broader conversations with different teams. How would this work in product? You know, how would this work for our goals sort of holistically? And then that's when we kind of like more democratically come to a unanimous decision of what we should do for the year. So it's an open brief. Right. It's one of those, I mean, it's such a special project. So it's one that we open up for the entire design team, and anyone who wants to contribute with art direction ideas can get involved.
Totally. So in that process where when you're kind of presenting like those final 3 ideas, is it you kind of presenting it to these other teams, or like the designers that worked on like these specific directions, like are they kind of going to bat for their idea?
It all depends on the room and which we're in and what makes sense. We don't really have like one way of doing things at Spotify. I think we're just trying to I think in the best case scenario, the designer or the team of designers that came up with an art direction speaks best about the work.
That makes sense.
So we're trying to enable that as much as possible. Sometimes, a meeting requires a smaller room, and then maybe someone like me will go in and obviously make sure that I can speak about each direction the way that the designers want it to be spoken about. It pretty much depends.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about this year's design. I just saw it, so it kind of like got really awesome like first impressions. Like it feels like very high contrast. I love like the typography turning into a gradient and like all the motion and everything. So I just love to hear kind of your take on what you guys ended up with for 2024.
Absolutely. This year was so fun. Every year is a challenge because we set the bar so high and we want it to be so great. And we also want it to be fundamentally different than the year before, the years before. So like I said, the strategy this year came with this insight that sort of pop culture is almost like in the cycle of reinvention, where a lot of sort of timeless influences gets paired with new ideas, and genres are mixing and merging in completely different ways, and the kind of things that used to be quite niche is now actually shaping pop culture.
Definitely.
So this was really interesting for us, and so long story short, we came up with this art direction that kind of loops and transforms itself, almost like this kind of loop of reinvention that we talk about. Another thing this year that I'm sure you know about is that we introduced a new typeface. So a bespoke typeface that we call Spotify Mix, and we wanted to find an angle and an opportunity to use the type in a really big way this year because we can.
Right.
you know.
Yeah, because now it's
Now it's
this new
ours
element.
and has all these different weights and it's a dynamic typeface. So we are actually using the type itself to create these like really interesting loops. And
Yeah,
then
amazing.
adding a lot of like, you know, gradients and movements to it.
Right.
Makes it just really fun and celebratory.
Definitely. Do like kind of the specific colors come from a certain place? Like, are they from the Spotify branding? Are they from like popular artists? Or where does the like, I guess like specific colors and colors combinations come from?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we have a quite large color palette at Spotify that we define as our brand palette. And we try to stay within that as much as possible. So it's not about like an artist per se or anything like that, but it's more about trying to find like a mix of colors that feels fresh compared to like the previous years.
Right.
But it also feels like it captures the spirit of this year.
Right.
So, you know, when it comes to colors, I think Spotify is been quite known for vibrant colors and how we kind of mix them together in avant-garde ways, you know. And so that's something we're really proud of, and we try to continue specifically with rap. We want rap to be like dialed up as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But then we also have different color combinations. So we don't want to go with just like one color combination because we want the work to sort of to vary as much as possible. So we have a palette of a few different combinations that we can switch between.
It looks really cool, especially this year. I thought the color combinations were awesome. Yeah, I guess kind of speaking to that a little bit more in terms of like the Spotify culture, like obviously rap is kind of like a new phenomenon relatively. And, you know, when it was first coming out, like it's Spotify, it's like the biggest streaming kind of company, obviously. So it kind of would have been so easy to be for something like new like this, like a new idea for consumers to be like super safe and kind of just like not going too crazy. How do you think, the culture and everything at Spotify ended up going with like, these avant-garde colors and all these kind of like somewhat like beautifully clashing like colors and gradients? How do you think that design direction won out? Was that like your influence? Was that just the influence of the design team? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
I think it's a mix of the brand evolving over time.
Yeah.
You know, Spotify has been a colorful brand for many years, you know, and much thanks to some of the partners that helped create that initial branding. And then we have definitely evolved it over time. You know, we're always almost in this stage of evolution where we keep like reformulating the brand to work as well as possible for us. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you in the sense that I think a lot of brands would look at a project like Wrapped and just figure out like what is a Wrapped art direction,
right?
And then maybe you switch one or two things, but like, you know,
it stays true to the brand.
Yeah, I personally feel like there's so many reasons not to do that. And I can just name a few, but I think one thing that I feel like is so powerful is if you go to like, let's say Instagram and you search for Spotify Wrapped, the hashtag, you see this like grid of share cards. And the design is different across the different years, and it always starts working like this wayfinding where you can see like, oh, like 2018 or, you know, 2022. And I think that adds to kind of the specialness of Wrapped. I think another thing is that there's a surprise and delight in Wrapped. You know, people are kind of anticipating when it's coming out, like, but also like how is it gonna look and feel? And I think it adds to like the fun of Wrapped.
Definitely
adds to conversations for sure within the creative community. You know, people have all kinds of opinions. You know, and we really love that. I think it makes it even more special that it feels like it's become part of kind of you know, online culture, if you may.
Yeah. Totally. I feel like the conversations are always happening, specifically like in the design community. I think people love having opinions and people love having, you know, objective opinions about subjective things. Do you ever listen to like kind of the feedback of the community in terms of the design, or is it kind of like you trust yourself and your team's kind of design knowledge and ability to just be like, we're doing our thing and that's what Wrapped's going to be like?
No, we trust our own, you know, aesthetics and instincts, and we do what we think is right and what we think is fun and what we think it should be. And, you know, I think, you know, as humans or designers, we're always going to have reactions to something. It's based on our own experiences, right? Our own aesthetics and what we like. And obviously, if something is fundamentally wrong and everyone
Yeah.
agrees to it, we will listen and we'll try
Sure.
to do better next year. But
Yeah.
when it comes to subjective, like I don't like gradients or
Yeah.
something like that, I think that's the beauty of the world we live in. You know,
Agreed.
like we're all different and
Yeah.
we're gonna like different things, and you're gonna like some art directions more than others, and I think that's healthy.
Absolutely.
But I think like as someone who, you know, leads a team or the conversations we have as a team, this is not something we, you know,
Love that.
are specifically bothered by.
Yeah.
We actually really appreciate that people, you know, have these kind of opinions because it just adds to the conversations.
Agreed.
But I think I would also want to say that, you know, it's always a balance of creating like a design system and
Yeah.
then also a sort of a creative approach, and these things need to work together. So a lot of times like people might be bothered by a specific thing, but they don't realize that the bigger vision,
Right.
you know, needs to be thought out really carefully.
Yeah.
And whatnot. So
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like good art, you know, is going to spark some sort of debate. If everyone loved it or everyone didn't, like, it's just kind of the fact that everyone's talking about it is also kind of important to the concept of wrapped itself. I guess when you're designing, like, is the thought of like virality and shareability, is that part of the design like considerations, or is it kind of like you have the strategy, the brief, and everything that you're kind of going off of? And I guess is virality and everything kind of part of the strategy that you're getting from that strategy team, like in the brief?
no, it's a good question, but
Yeah.
no. I think we just focus on doing something that we love ourselves. And we never think about like, you know, is this thing a viral thing or not?
Right.
I think, again, for me personally, I always gravitate to the kind of work that makes you feel something. I think a lot of design is solving communication challenges, but a lot of times it kind of stops there.
Right, yeah.
And I love this idea of when design can solve those communication challenges, but also makes you feel something.
Yeah.
When you do that kind of design that makes you feel something, you're going to feel different about it.
Definitely.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, but it to me at least becomes way more powerful when it evokes something. And yeah, I mean, I think the wrapped art directions throughout the years has definitely influenced, you know, design a little bit. We've seen things kind of come out of it too, and it's really special that way.
Yeah.
But the viral thing is I think if you do good work and
Yeah.
it makes sense, it kind of like takes a life of its own.
Definitely.
And that's what we aim for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have my question about like the stretch text from that 2021,
Yeah.
from the 2021 Wrapped, and the virality of Brat, which was obviously like a huge story in terms of music this year and everything. And like, I think there was definitely some discourse and stuff that I saw where it's like, wow, like Spotify Wrapped walked so Brat could run and the viral kind of thing. I'd love to hear your take on, I guess, that specific thing, and then also like the design of Brat and everything, since that's such a big, I think that felt like a moment where music kind of crossed over into design in terms of like the conversations people were having.
Yeah. I mean, I have no sort of idea, how, you know, the connection or non-connection between the two. I haven't heard or seen anything.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, back to what Wrapped I think is doing quite well is that we are managed to, a lot of times with the art direction, kind of move away from sort of the sort of rules that are in place, what you're supposed and not supposed to do with design. Like last year and was super free form, kind of moved away from the idea of grids and just kind of started placing things more on emotion, what we felt looked good.
Definitely.
And I think some of that aesthetics can definitely influence other designers. I don't think that the Brat design specifically looked at Wrapped, to be honest with you. But I think as a whole, I think it's really healthy and fun to see the design community as a whole embracing more of these kind of aesthetics as well.
Definitely.
I got an email, I think, last year from a designer who I believe was based in India, who basically just wanted to thank the team for putting out an art direction of that scale.
Yeah.
Because she felt like it enabled her to design in a similar manner with confidence, and she felt really like emotional about it.
Definitely.
And I mean, those things are so amazing when you get that kind of connection from the design community as well.
I really agree. Yeah, I feel like pushing it forward in such like a visible way that like feels like very mainstream, but then also being very unique and like having a very specific kind of position and everything is cool, and it's honestly pretty rare in culture and like corporate culture and everything. So I think it's actually, definitely a really exciting thing. I think final kind of question in terms of the design process is like, there's obviously a lot of motion and, sharing things on like mobile and different, a bunch of different kind of platforms and everything. How much of the design process is informed by like the technical restrictions of like coding things, animating things, or is it kind of like we have this idea and then maybe like the tech kind of team can say like, we can kind of do this or that. How does that kind of play into the design process?
I think obviously motion is now a really important part of any branding. The more surfaces and platforms that enables motion to live, the more important it becomes for anyone who's trying to do something. It's a really important piece for us as well. Obviously, Wrapped lives on so many different surfaces, from product to marketing to like all kinds of screens. So I think we're very good at knowing now what works based on our experience.
Right.
So it's always in the back of our head, and we want to make sure that any art direction that we end up with kind of have this like seamless sort of way in to move,
Right.
And the more it like naturally moves, almost like the better it works. Every platform also has its challenges of what you can do, right? So we work really close with different teams to every year just make it better and better. And I'm so excited about this year and how it looks on products specifically. I think it's going to be really, really fun for people to experience Wrap this year.
Awesome. And I guess also, one last one too is in terms of kind of, obviously music and people's Wrapped is like such a personal thing, because it's like obviously like what you spent a lot of your time doing. And in terms of like sharing and everything, there's a little bit of kind of ability to customize, like you can kind of swipe between the different colors. Is there, is like personalization and that kind of thing another design consideration or something that you're looking to doing more of in the future or anything in terms of the Wrapped?
Well, I'm focusing on this year.
Right.
Before, but no, it's a good question. I think we're always looking to figure out where we can push and evolve and tweak things and make things better. We're looking forward to continuing experimenting in all kinds of ways and figuring out just how Wrapped can be as awesome as possible for people. I think, having the ability to swipe between the share cards, for example, just gave people like one extra level of personalization, like you said, because some people like love black or some people like love pink, and then you can then pick that share card that feels the most like you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that was a great move on our part to enabling that. So we're constantly seeing what's possible and what we can do and what feels right for the year and whatnot, and kind of merge it together. So I mean, we'll keep pushing and try to make it as good as possible. Yeah.
I guess any last kind of final thoughts on Wrap this year, the future of it? I'd just love to know, kind of where your mind's at the day that it comes out.
I want to, if I can, shout out the team who worked so hard on it this year, specifically, the design team with Melissa, who came up with the original art direction, Ellen and Bruno, who kind of teamed up and helped craft that. You had Reb, who sort of oversaw design, Marcelo, Shivani, Josephine, Martin, Chris, and William. So a big team. People were kind of owning different pieces and collaborating really closely. And it is really a big team effort to make it work. And people need to like be able to work really, really sort of collaborative for it to like work, And the team has just been absolutely incredible. They always are, but
amazing.
It gets bigger every year, and the team killed it this year. So shout out team.
Shout out team.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. I feel like that's kind of. I think we got a good amount of stuff.
Yeah. No, I love the conversation.
Yeah. Hang out. We can talk. I don't know.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit. Absolutely.
Yeah. What kind of stuff do you do outside of Wrap? I guess you don't need